I'm Margaret Carney, and I'm curator of the Ashtray show at the International Museum of Dinnerware Design. And tonight I'm going to talk about the ubiquitous ashtray, and that's for several different reasons, but which will be apparent momentarily. I want to give a disclaimer that I am not an authority on ashtrays. Okay, my PhD is in Asian art history and Chinese ceramics and archaeology in particular. So I'm not the authority on ashtrays, and so the exhibition and this presentation will not be everything you ever wanted to know about ashtrays. There's lots of other people who can do that, so don't be looking for the comprehensive viewpoint. If you want more information with links to articles on ashtrays that summarize various aspects and talk about everything you're going to hear a little bit about tonight, then if you can go to our website at dinnerwaremuseum.org and go to the ashtray exhibit, then you'll see an essay. You'll also see a wonderful essay that Scott Vermillion did with a collaboration with Annie Wright on ashtrays the right way. And it's a brilliant essay. So that's linked up right on the front page of our website. So please look at that essay also. So there's basically the focus of Ashtray, the exhibit, and this talk has to do with the intersection of dining and smoking, or dining and ashtrays. And there's four major points that we covered in the show. And one is where the ashtray goes on the dining table. That's like the beginning part of this. And so some people don't know, because in general, people don't smoke indoors. You can't smoke at restaurants. Most people don't want you smoking in your home if you've got non-smokers and all of that. So it shows you where they went, especially if you didn't have a maid. If you had a maid, they might be bringing out the ashtrays when the dishes are cleared and the dessert is brought to the table. Because in general, people weren't supposed to smoke at the table, at formal dining tables. And it was more something where the ashtrays would come out after dessert for the women, and the men would all be off in a parlor smoking anyway. So that's one thing. So where the ashtrays go. Next is the beauty of Art Deco and mid-century modern, key design points, but the beautiful ashtrays that were created. And then there's a focus also on novelty ashtrays with a couple of prime examples that I think you'll enjoy. And if you wonder what I mean by that, you just have to wait a minute and I'll show you. And then the fourth major point had to do with how women were really targeted by big tobacco from earliest days on. So 100 years ago for sure, but earlier than that even. And they were lured into smoking by advertisements and by jewelry and little trinkets you carried in your purse with pocket ashtrays and matching compacts and things like that. So there's four kind of points. And then the last point is that there's also a personal story to do with this. And the fact is that 50 years ago this year, my father, who was a physician, died of metastatic lung cancer. And 11 years later, my mother died of pneumonia, all from smoking, being heavy smokers. And I grew up in a house where there were ashtrays all over the house, silent butler to empty them, blah, blah, blah. And then, so I was used to ashtrays being on the dining table, and I'll show you a photo of that in a minute. However, I didn't even pause for a second when I started collecting things for the Dinnerware Museum, because I thought ashtrays were part of dining. And so that's how the museum got started with its ashtray collection. So I think I'm going to start sharing my screen here with you. I'm going to show some installation views and then individual objects. And I'm going to go really kind of fast. And so we're probably going to show a major portion of the 125 ashtrays that are in the exhibition, installation views. And I think I'm going to share my screen here right now. Okay, and I hope you can all see this. So I do want to start out by saying, well, as I'm showing this giant ashtray here, which we had so many of these in our home. They were, I don't know if you grew up with smokers, they smelled horrible when you burned a cigarette in a plastic ashtray. They looked awful and they smelled and everything else. But I did find it amusing, in one of the etiquette books that I think is from the 50s said there was a list of places that you should not smoke. And so included in the places you should not smoke is in church, when dancing, in a sick room or where someone's convalescing, in the room of a newborn baby, which I think you're going to see in a few minutes. Not everybody bought into that theory. And also in crowded elevators. That's kind of the limits of where they said in the 50s that you should not smoke. So whenever I'm doing something, investigating something, I always kind of look at visuals and what I can learn from things that are famous that we all look at. So everybody knows this Norman Rockwell from Freedom from Want. And the thing that I learned from this is that on this table, where she's setting that giant turkey down in that little tiny place on the table, there's no ashtrays on the table. So we're not learning from her where the ashtrays went on the table. However, the year before, in 1942, Edward Hopper, one of my all-time favorite artists, this guy is smoking in the diner in Nighthawks. And I don't see the ashtray there, but clearly not everybody's not smoking and not everybody is smoking. So I threw in a Philip Guston, and this one's called Painting, Smoking, Eating from 1973. And since he seemed to be lying down in bed with, I think that's food on his chest, I think I could add, reclining, painting, smoking, eating. But that's someone else's take on dining and a table. And so then we're going backwards to 1636 to Breuer's The Smokers. And these are famous. You would have, if you've taken any art history classes, you've seen them. And I think as for the ashtray, which I can't see, it looks to me, judging by the floor of this tavern, that's the ashtray is the floor. And then when I was searching for interesting images, I came across a whole lot of Max Beckmann. This one's man seated at a table smoking from 1899. And I can't tell whether that's an ashtray or a teeny tiny plate that he's got his cigarette balanced over, but I did enjoy that. And then my last one, my little trip through art history and smoking at the table, dining, is another Edward Hopper, Soir Bleu from 1914. And this one, of course, is his typical subject of alienation, where all these people, the clown, the pimp, and the probably prostitute, and the bourgeois people, that they're all together smoking and whatever, but there's really nobody communicating. So, okay, well, 1914 for that, and then 1914, so I'm kind of focused on 1914, the year. That's the year that Henry Ford published The Case Against the Little White Slaver. And this is a booklet that my father gave me, obviously before he died, so in the 1970s. And it's a pretty bold statement, as in they knew everything about the evils of smoking and the harm of smoking. And Henry Ford was a militant non-smoker. He knew enough, and he writes about it. And Thomas Edison writes a little bit in here too, because that was one of his entourage was Edison and Ford and the rest of them. Anyway, in this book, he talks about how it's not really, because addiction is addiction, he's not really going to save the people, the men, because that's all he writes about is the men who are already smoking because they're addicted. But he wants to stop and prevent and persuade people that are young men not to smoke. And so that's the focus of The Case Against the Little White Slaver. But the other date for 1914 is part of this personal story. And that personal story has to do with this image. I'm starting with this image. This is one of my favorite photographs of my mom and dad in the 1930s on the beach in the shores of Lake Michigan in Ludington. And they're both smoking. They both look happy and beautiful. And I'm figuring that the beaches are a giant ashtray here, because I see the cigarettes and the matches, but I don't see the ashtray. So I think the beach is in their entire big ashtray. And then I'm sticking on the family photos here to figure out how ashtrays fit into everything. So this is the first house that my parents owned. Well, they didn't own it. They rented this house in Iowa City when he started working at the University of Iowa hospital. So first house, but the only picture I have of the interior of the house has two ashtrays in it right off. This is early 1940s. And so there's an ashtray on the coffee table, which I remember that coffee table from being a child. And then in the lower left-hand corner is another ashtray. And then because this is a dinnerware museum talk, I'm pointing out on the far corner cabinet over there, there's a teapot and some dishes. And I've identified those dishes as my parents' wedding china, which is this cabbage sauce. So that's the teapot that's on that hutch. And so I have two pictures from my entire life of, because we didn't have cell phones, of course, in this is the 1970s. So this is some of my family at my grandmother, who's on the right side of the table. It's her 84th birthday, and we're in Iowa. My mom and dad are at the head of the table, and my sister Kay's there, and a couple of her kids and her husband. And so what's interesting about this is because the ashtray, the ubiquitous type of plastic ashtray sitting on the table at not on the head of the table with my dad at the right. And then the only other picture I have of them is this view of the same day. You can see how formal it is because the milk cartons are out on the table and there's the Corelle-ware and everything. But my mom's ashtray is to her by her elbow there on the left. So they're smoking, having birthday cake, family gathering. But it didn't hit me until a couple days ago when I was out for a walk and I was thinking about these photos and how lucky I was to have photos of my little niece Kim there smoking, smiling in the front and everything. And so, but I realized this, my grandmother was born in 1891, November 1st, 1891. And my dad died of lung cancer on November 4th, 1976. So a year after this photo was taken, my dad was dead. So that was the lesson I thought about, which brings us to ashtray here. So it's a personal story, but I know it's personal for many of you. That's not unique to my family. But so the entranceway to ashtray when you come to the exhibition is this Frank Art, Art Deco smoking stand silhouetted against the wall, and some place settings next to it. So, but I have to move forward here. So here is the Frank Art ashtray from some different views, and it's really a magnificent. This is one of the examples of how beautiful ashtrays can be. So late 20s, early 30s. But I'm going to immediately go to what I think is kind of the missing link between dinnerware and ashtrays. And that is this baby cup, which I've had since the early days of the museum. It was for a show. I was showing historic babyware from the art of high chair fine dining, where we charged artists with making babyware of anything, materials, glass, ceramic, whatever, paper. But I had some historic work. And so here's Humpty Dumpty smoking. And he's one of a set of 3 pieces of babyware. And the moment I saw this, and I knew when we did an ashtray sometime that it would be made into the poster child. So we literally made Humpty Dumpty isn't the poster child, he's a poster egg for ashtray, which gives you the dates of the show. So we also put him on a paper plate. And here's the actual set of baby dishes with Humpty Dumpty on it. But that's kind of the missing link. I'm not saying anybody ever used that cup or any of these pieces for an ashtray. They could have, I don't know. But it is kind of the missing link with the rare picture of Humpty Dumpty smoking. And there is some historic references that Humpty Dumpty could be a stand-in for some political references. But now we're moving, because I don't have you for long enough tonight. We're moving right into where the ashtrays went on the table. And so very helpful, because there aren't that many books that actually show you these linear charts of where ashtrays go on the table. But this is a 1967 YWCA cookbook from Thailand, found for us by the University of Michigan archivist Julie McClune, who runs the Longoni Culinary Institute, archives there. So there's the actual book, and then here's a cleaned up version that we have hanging on the wall of that, where it shows you how the maid would place your dessert service and all the rest of it. So moving on, but there's other examples. So here is from the Pullman manual, from Manual for Waiters from the Pennsylvania Railroad. And this would be, it's a bit different than your standard idea where the ashtray goes right before you're at the top of your dinner plate. So this case shows you that it's by the lampshade at the edge and is not in the center of the table like the other ones. And here are some, just threw in some railroad ashtray from Chessie, my favorite line because it has a cat on it, of course. And so Chessie was the symbol for decades for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad. And it's even on paper plates and napkins, and car ferry from Ludington was a Chesapeake and Ohio entity, has the Chessie coasters. So, and then there's all kinds of information about smoking on airplanes when they could, and how the flight attendants kind of rebelled so that we would get the no smoking on airplanes, besides smoking section and then no smoking. But here's a picture out of a cookbook, which dates from 2006, but the pictures are from earlier times and from earlier illustrations that American Airlines used. Very interesting, with everybody smoking. And then this is from a brochure for the Cunard Queen Mary, showing the smoking room, where you see no people in it, but there's ashtrays literally scattered everywhere. And then for visuals about where the ashtrays went, all we have to do is look in magazines and other promotional things, such as cookbooks and things like that. So I'm going to show you a few without telling you where they're all from. All different kinds of place settings where you've got your ashtrays. Usually they're in front of the table, but here on the buffet, they're set to the side by the coffee and lemons. And then they're over to the left of the fork. But in general, unless it's people playing bridge, you're kind of an Art Deco looking setup. They go even with a bridge game, a bridge lunch in here. You can see they're set right above the dining plate. And these are a little grainy. I should mention that, well, you can't see me right now, but Vicky Matranga just sent me some wonderful items. And one of the things she sent me was the Perfect Hostess. And the Perfect Hostess has these images, which are maybe grainy, but they're showing you right where the ashtrays go for your engagement announcement table, which should be before your wedding dinner table here. And look at the cigarettes in the little crystal cups there on the table, with the ashtrays in front of every place setting. And here, if you're going to have a shower table, I guess that should have been before the other two events. And then another thing which is included in the exhibition is Lucy's Notebook, which is an undated publication that Lucille Ball is featured in, with recipes and all kinds of things. And she shows you in her little notebook, which is early 50s probably, sponsored by Philip Morris, of course, where the ashtrays and the cigarettes go on the table. Little containers with them. You only get 2 smokes if you're down there dining with the people with the pie. And then the last page of the book is, here's a final reminder, the perfect ending for a wonderful meal, Philip Morris. And almost every page of this booklet, it has Lucy and Ricky smoking in it. Okay, so back to when we were showing the Frank art design at the beginning. I wanted to show you the place settings that we placed on plinths there. So including the branch shell, each one has the ashtray where it would go above the dinner plates. Color Flight, Kay Lemoyne design in copper glow in this case. There's a giant blow up of that little tiny ashtray. So the Homer Laughlin Epicure that Don Schreckengost designed. This is important because that blue ashtray you see there, that is a prototype, and it is, I should say, it's the prototype. So there's no other, if you have one, I want to know. There's no other of these ashtrays in the whole world, and you'd have to come here in person to actually see it in its full beauty. So there it is. And then Eva Zeisel's Tomorrow's Classic in the Caprice pattern that Hall China produced in the 50s. There's the ashtray, otherwise known as a nut dish to some people. Giant blow up of it. And then Glidden Pottery, designed by Glidden Parker, Chi Chi Poodle, and all of these poodles were hand painted, no two are alike, of Chi Chi Poodle, and June Chisholm did that. So there's a cigarette box with a lid on it and the ashtray. And then Harkerware, the white clover that Russell Wright designed. And a couple of tables are set in the exhibition with the Anchor Hocking Manhattan with the ashtrays in place. And if you look carefully, you'll see that I only have 3 of these ashtrays. So one of the people at the table is a non-smoker. I've made them that. And here's a detail. And there's the ashtray, big as the moon. And then we have another table, a Haywood Wakefield set with Eva Zeisel's Tomorrow's Classic, just in white, which is how she designed it. And you can see the ashtrays in place on the table. And there is it if it was giant. And then of these, the Arabia Rusca that Ulla Procope designed, this is from the early 1960s, and you can see the ashtrays in place there. And there's a different view of it. And the ashtray. And just a couple other things. We have quite a few ashtrays with different sets, and this is on view in our Dining Grails exhibition, the Stelton that Arne Jacobsen designed for Celinda. And the ashtray is this little thing, which I misidentified when it was first given to the museum when we first opened. I thought it was something for a tea bag. I did not know that that little handle was meant for you to dump the ashes into the bottom of it. And then because we moved here over a year ago, we still haven't unpacked everything. So I have part of this Winfield desert set unpacked, but not the ashtrays. So that didn't make it into the exhibition. But some of my favorite things in the entire exhibition are these original design drawings from the 1930s done by Victor Schreckengost. And I absolutely love these. This one we purchased. The family has put 18 original design renderings on permanent loan to the museum, but this one I actually purchased because I was so intrigued by the fact that he included a lit cigarette in the design drawing. I hadn't seen that before, and maybe you have, but I had not, and I love it. So here are some of these fabulous lunch and snack sets with the ashtray compartment so close to the beverage and the food, as close as you could possibly humanly get it. But these are so wonderful, and none of these went into production, not the previous one I showed and not this one, which is on permanent exhibition kind of in our main gallery. But they're just beautiful designs from the 1930s that Victor did. And then just to show you, he did other things. Scott Vermillion recently gave us this, and we have a number of these Christmas plates and ashtrays that Victor did and his brother Don Schreckengost did. Just to show you, the designs are lovely, though I don't know if he actually did the design, but he signed the decals that are on these with the Christmas trees. These are very collectible pieces. People really enjoy them, and very functional if you're a smoker. So just to carry the idea of the compartmentalized lunch and snack set tray or bridge trays. We have sets of these, quite a few of them. They're unmarked. We don't know who made them. Nobody wanted to claim them, but they're ubiquitous also in the once again, you want the ashtray as close to your beverage and your sandwich or whatever else you're having. And then Hazel Atlas and lots of other glass makers did this. This is the Candlewick luncheon set. Okay, and then we're going over to a couple of vignettes that we did. People that know me know I like to recreate little scenes out of things. So this is 1951, and this pretty much everything in this is from December 3rd, 1951. The television's in 1951, Philco. The, what else? The clock, the Harkerware is 1951. And the television show that's on there is December 3rd, 1951, and it's the episode of Lucille Ball. It's only been on since October, and it's called Men Are Messy. And in this episode, I'll show you a close-up in a minute, but Lucy's stubbing her cigarette out in a Glidden Pottery shirred egg server, just exactly like the one in Matrix Blue on top of the television set. So we'll move on to that. Here it is, blown up big. But it's not an ashtray. She used it as one, but it's a shirred egg server. So because I can't, so these are all the 1951 things. So we even recreated the time on the clock, which you'll probably never see again, is set to the television program started at 9 o'clock Eastern. And so we set it for 9:20, which was the time period where the video that you're seeing these little pictures from, these videos are of her talking on the telephone and putting out her cigarette in the shirred egg server are exactly at that time period. So we had fun with that. But Lucy liked to stub her cigarette out in other Glidden Pottery ashtrays. So here's one, but somebody loaned me this photo, and I apologize for not remembering who did loan me this. But it has an arrow pointing at the shirred egg server on the table card table, excuse me, coffee table in a different episode. And here's one where she's going to clobber Ricky with a short egg server. So it had lots of uses besides being a server for short eggs and putting it in your oven. So we made a whole bunch of magnets. Casey O'Connor helped us, ceramic artist. And well, he didn't help us. He did them, okay? He made them. And so we're selling them in our gift shop. Shameless, what you call it, promotion here for merchandise. Anyway, so we have a couple other movies that we took little excerpts from, and those are available in the exhibition now. But I can't show those here to you because I don't have the right to do that. But from Now Voyager, a great movie, in my opinion, with Bette Davis and Paul Henreid, is the scene where he's lighting, the sexually fraught scene where he's lighting 2 cigarettes at once and offering one to Bette Davis in the movie. So, and there's another movie too. So we have a couple movie clips. So here's another view of Ashtray, the installation with shelving, which has a lot of ashtrays on it. And so that means we're going to move on to a different vignette. So this one, if you see the sign on the wall right by the Schreckengost original design drawings, it says pediatrician's office. So this is our recreation of a 1959 pediatrician's office with the expectant mother seated in the waiting room. And what has she got on the little table in the waiting room? It is an ashtray that the pediatrician's office put out for her to extinguish her cigarette. So it's for the expectant mother or the mother who just gave birth, sitting in the waiting room, waiting to see the pediatrician. And the ashtray has 3 baby footprints in it. I think I have a close-up. Here we go. So this was actually the first one I got of these. They're all gray, by the way, like your lungs would be if you were smoking in the waiting room waiting for your pediatrician. But it has the Daniel Mellman, the designer who I'll be talking about in a couple minutes, donated this to us. He did not design it, let's make that clear, but he donated it. He had the foresight to do that. So you can put your cigarette out in the 1-week-old baby's foot, the 1-year-old baby's foot, or the 2-year-old baby's foot. I have to tell you one more story. One gentleman who came into the museum made a comment about this, and he said that the actual 3 sizes of feet was, the big one was if your baby was full-born, full-term, because you weren't smoking, but the little one was if your baby was premature because you were smoking the entire time during your pregnancy. How can we date this to 1959 when we don't know who designed it and all that? And that's because on the bottom of it, the ashtray was sponsored by Similac, which is a baby formula company. And in 1959, they added iron to their baby formula, and they also put this ashtray out. So the ashtray has the baby footprint, and it tells all about how great their baby formula is because it has iron in it now. So, and a few years, no, just about the same time, actually, this ashtray reappeared as an advertising piece. So it's differently shaped, same baby's feet, same concept, but it's for a children's shoe store that's in Philadelphia. So that's a little sidebar there. Okay, so she's sitting here waiting, but what happens? The stuff is spilled out of her purse. And this is part of our message about how women were enticed into smoking by so many different ways. And we'll get to the advertisements in a couple minutes. But right now we're looking at, I think it's Wiesner of Miami, Florida, came up with these little products. So they're mother of pearl. I think I have a close-up of it. Here they are. Mother of pearl. So it's a smoking set. That little thing in the front that looks like a frying pan is a little pocket ashtray. There's your pack for your cigarette pack, your compact, your lipstick and mirror, and your comb. That's what they all look like if you've got them all open. And there's your ashtray close up, and somebody used it. Okay, so we're moving on from novelty ashtray with the baby footprints to braille ashtrays, which a lot of collectors have. Okay, they're common and you can buy them in all the, not gray like the baby's footprint. These are all lovely pastels and a few other darker colors, but mostly pastels. And so the question is, okay, so there's a seeing eye dog in the middle and a walking cane, and then there's braille writing of the alphabet. And the question would be like, we don't know who designed these and who would take credit for them, but why would you be learning braille from ostensibly a dirty ashtray? So, and here's a detail of a couple of the colors of them. If you have information, let me know. Okay, so these have nothing to do with Braille ashtrays, but they're colorful and we have a group of them. And so these are the original 5 colors plus the turquoise, which was added almost immediately thereafter. So the 6 original Fiesta colors that Homer Laughlin did that Frederick Curtin Reed designed. These date between 1936 and 1938. And we know that by several different ways, but one of the ways we know it, excuse my bad photograph, but it has 7 concentric rings. So this is dated because of the 7 concentric rings on the feet of each one of them. It does not yet say Fiesta on it. So related, we're kind of looking at Homer Laughlin, so we're looking at Harlequin here, and in the exhibition is this Harlequin coffee cup with an ashtray built into the saucer. And then also in the exhibition, the first of, I hope, many of the 4 seasons that we'll get for the museum, the New York World's Fair 4 seasons, and this is summer in blue and turquoise. And then as we're moving along here, I'm showing you the pedestal here while I race through and show you what's in the pedestal. So the Picasso ashtray from 1952. And then we were lucky enough to get loans from the Russell Wright Design Center at Manitoga from 3 ashtrays. So one is created by Russell Wright in 1933, chromium rod ashtray. And this one by Mary Wright. This is from circa 1939, number 30 ashtray with wire grill, also on loan from Manitoga, the Russell Wright Design Center. And another Mary Wright designed ashtray, this one, the cork ashtray. We're really thrilled to have these on view in the museum. And if you look at the accession numbers, you can tell they were recent acquisitions for Manitoga also. And then related to that, but completely different, is an example of Russell Wright's favorite ashtray. This is one he did not design. A gentleman named Haino Falcon did this circular brass ashtray, which the Wrights discovered and brought home in the 1930s. And this is on loan from Russell and Mary Wright's daughter, Annie. And I thank her so much for the loan. It's a fabulous ashtray. And you can look at it. You can see he used it. They both smoked a lot, okay? They were both heavy smokers. Maybe they both used it. Anyway, here is Bob Turner. We borrowed this piece from Alfred. So I was affiliated with the museum at Alfred and actually acquired some of these pieces when I was there in the 90s. And this is one of my favorite pieces that was made by a contemporary artist. He did this one between 1949 and 50, and it's a style that he's very well known for. This one is by Ted Randall, who also taught at Alfred. They both went to school at Alfred and they ended up teaching there. And this one has a fabulous kind of tortoiseshell glaze on it. It's a beautiful design that's in the exhibition on loan from the Alfred Ceramic Art Museum. Also on loan, I borrowed 3 pieces from Alfred, and this one is a commemorative ashtray. It's kind of the double whammy because it's a uranium glaze from the 1930s and it's an ashtray. On the bottom, it would have been made by students and faculty or a collaboration of the above in the 1930s when everybody from California to New York used uranium glazes. What's interesting about it is on the bottom it says NYSCC for New York State College of Ceramics. And this was something, when I was there, I had a box of them in my office, a small box. And these were given out to visiting dignitaries when they came to the College of Ceramics, probably in the 1930s. And it was a memento from their visit to Alfred. So there's a gift. Okay, so also even smaller than that little ashtray is this one from Pewabic pottery from the 1940s that the museum purchased not too long ago. Wonderful piece. So Pewabic pottery, if you don't know, it's one of the oldest continuous potteries in the United States, located in Detroit, Michigan, and known for its luster glazes. All right, so now we're coming to another reason why women were, lured into smoking. And so some of it has to do with kind of jewelry and not just the little cosmetic things in pocket ashtrays. But in this case, Cynthia Sanford came to the museum one day and we were talking about the upcoming show Ashtray, and I showed her the one with the baby feet, and we were talking about weird things to do with ashtrays. And And she says, oh, well, her mother was born in 1920. And when she was 13 years old, she was smoking. She was smoking and she was dating a guy from Princeton, if I remember this story correct. Cynthia might be here tonight and she could correct this. But anyway, so she had 2 charm bracelets. One of the charm bracelets was from the gentleman at Princeton. The other one was this one, which is little teeny tiny. And this is how small they are, because here's a pencil next to it that she sent me this image. The little packs of cigarettes. And if you tap the bottom, only on the camel one does this one actually, the cigarettes pop out of the charm bracelet thing. And I want to bring to your attention that the pack of Lucky Strike on the far right is actually have the green packaging, which indicates it was made in the 1930s, and this bracelet dates from that time period, which we know already. But they changed the marketing and the brand and not the brand, but the marketing for it and the packaging later on. So this one is kind of a controversial ashtray in that I bought it as a Victorian ashtray. It's a tiny pocket-sized ashtray. I bought it thinking it was rare, and it was of the ilk of hair wreaths. So in Victorian times, hair wreaths, you had the deceased hair and you made it into a wreath form. And so they were remembrances in shadow boxes that people kept in their homes. In this case, I thought that was human hair and a butterfly in it. The back of it's kind of this filigreed thing, but I actually don't know. I'm not taking it apart. And in the 1960s, Japan cranked out a few things that look kind of similar to this, but they don't look as convincingly Victorian to me. They look kind of chintzy, whereas this looks quite lovely. Anyway, I don't know. So if you have more information, you can let me know and I'll change some labels. And then another loan for the exhibition, I mentioned Dan Melman, who gave me the baby footprinted ashtray that he did not design, but he did design this. And here's a prototype from Steuben. The glass piece on your left is circa 1996, and it's called a cigar bowl. It is the only one in the universe of these, another prototype included in this exhibition. Because Dan Melman designed it and it never went into production at Steuben and Corning. And so he did do the white stoneware bowl next to it, which is also a cigar bowl or a trinket dish. And he made 4 of them for the exhibition. One of them is in the show and is going to be a gift to the museum. And then 3 are for sale in our gift shop. So wonderful designs by Dan. And here's some different views of that, which he designed in the 90s. He also designed this commemorative piece for the Brooklyn Bridge people in 1983 on their 100th anniversary, the centennial of the Brooklyn Bridge, which is a fine ashtray on exhibit. And then now you can tell we're heading towards this case, and we're going to lickety-split go through here because I'm convinced I can do it. So, okay, going back to here. In the corner there, see a pink and black mid-century stool there. And that pink and black mid-century stool has this Murano glass piece by Alfredo Barbini from the 1950s and 60s, who was in all kinds of major exhibitions, and it's included in our exhibition. Well, we own it. Everything pretty much, if I haven't said alone, it has a big caption, are things that we own in our permanent collection. So plastic, we're starting with plastic because much as it doesn't rot in the dump, but I love plastic. And here's Kay Lemoyne's, one of his designs, one with the original sticker on it and the bottom of the foot showing you that says it's styled by Kay Lemoyne. And then I don't know who made this one. It has no mark on it, and it's a wonderful shape and a wonderful feel to it. These were done for Air France. They were clip onto your dining tray on your airline. I got those in Montreal if they come from, people want to know where things come from. And then the Ubiquitous Ashtray, which we had stacks of them. Mostly in our house, they weren't yellow and stuff. They were gray and brown and black. But other plastic ashtrays are touting the Mount Sinai Hospital. So is it not ironical that hospitals were branding their own ashtrays in the mid-century? And then we're moving on to away from plastic for a moment to go to beanbag ashtrays, which you may or may not have thought about. So these beanbag ashtrays could go on the console of your car. I'm not sure what year we started having consoles on our cars, but also on your furniture, your upholstered furniture, because they wouldn't slide off the arm of a chair. Full of beans made of fabric and glass and ceramic and metal. And then moving on to some Art Deco ceramic designs. So just a couple of things. So here's from Japan from 1930s, 20s, 30s. Wonderful little figurines. These were all from the collection of Arthur Williams that Richard Gold gave the museum last year with a lot of works from the estate. So your cigarettes, I should have put some cigarettes in here so you could see how the saxophone player is playing. This one looks like Elvis, but it's a bit early for Elvis being the Art Deco period. And then I purchased this one because I loved him so much. He's really sweet. These were all made, by the way, those were all made for foreign consumption. Okay, and so we've got your glass. I don't know who made this, and if you do, please tell me. It's got no mark on it, and I don't know it. Here's what it looks like under black light. Here's another Steuben piece. This one I know the designer, but I forget what his name is. Sorry. And then some work from Fostoria. These are stacking ashtrays. Anchor Hocking, this is not Manhattan. This is, I confused them at first, but this is Park Avenue. So they're heavier, larger. Waterford in Ireland made ashtrays. Oh, and this one has a story with it. They all have stories, but we haven't time for that tonight. So this ashtray was, here I'm showing you on this fake picture. So that's really me and my siblings in 1955. And there's where the ashtray sat on the piano. So back to the ashtray. I thought it was a precious heirloom thing. And so I kept it all these years. And it turns out that because it was always on the piano and everybody played the piano. And so when I started researching this, I thought, well, I'll give this ashtray to the museum and it can be in the show. And it turns out it's an advertising ashtray from the cigarette brand Pall Mall. Okay, so it comes in a cranberry color, a green, a cobalt. Anyway, not a precious heirloom. It's no more precious than Howard Johnson's glass ashtrays or the Sherman House or this one, which is a camel. It's a black glass advertising ashtray with their logo and something about taste on it there. And then we're going into metal here as we work our way through various materials. This one is like your Kool-Aid pitcher, you know, where you remember what it tasted like in the 50s or 60s when you had Kool-Aid in one of those aluminum pitchers. It had this kind of off taste to it, but that's how you know it. This ashtray was used a lot, but it would have matched those sets. And then also metallic is the Snuff It ashtray in its original box. And this was, it would extinguish your cigarette so you aren't burning the place down. So as I launch into a couple of ashtray stand things, this is a Julie Hordova photograph that she took, which she's famous for. And probably I think this was in Amsterdam since that's where she's based. And notice there's an ashtray stand by where the smokers are. Okay, and then back to the Frank art piece in the museum and a Chase chrome ashtray from the 1930s. And then the one which I know nothing about that's in our vignette there. I know nothing about it. It's got a glass insert. And then this one, which I think was in a cheap hotel or something at some point with a ceramic insert and kind of made of, I'll just say, art historically crappy materials. And then we're moving into some more ceramic related things, and we're starting with Wedgwood here. And I didn't include lighters and things except for the two Wedgwood ones because they went with sets, and excuse the cigarette there. We did some things during the pandemic where we used what we called comfort food and or cigarettes, and we put them in with famous makers, Peter Max and Roy Lichtenstein and stuff with food on them and sushi and stuff. Well, this is left over from that. I don't know how it migrated here, and Wedgwood Queensware. So these have the whole sets with the lighter and the cigarette cases and lots of ashtrays. And then notable people besides Picasso who did ashtrays that are in our collection include Peter Max, this one for Syracuse, China, a false craft from the 1930s, which I think is just a fabulous design. And that's all I have to say about it. Russell Wright Bauer piece. And then we have lots of Michael Lack's designs in the collection, but this is his ashtray for Capri, which I think is gorgeous. And if you note that these all have like wooden bases, walnut bases glued on rather poorly done, but beautiful shapes that he designed. And then these are very popular. Marcia of California, they're huge. People are supposed to use these at one time. And then Heath Ceramics did wonderful ashtrays, and Ezra Shales did an article that you can find about Heath ashtrays. This has this famous V notch in it, which I guess firefighters love because this would self-extinguish your cigarette. If you were to fall asleep while you had your cigarette in this ashtray, it would extinguish itself. I don't know if that's patented or not, but, and then these cups, which I know as smokers cups, but Edith Heath said when she was about 90 years old in an article in the New York Times that she did not design these smokers cups. She emphatically said that they were designed so in the cupboard they would hang from these loop handles, these low set loop handles, and then dust wouldn't collect inside them. But here's a picture of somebody. This is where I got the information. You can hold your cigarette and drink at the same time. That's why I know them. They don't make them anymore, and they deny that that's what it is. But okay, so one more story here before I show a few more ashtrays. So the Waldorf Astoria did this ashtray, had this ashtray made by Scammell, Lamberton, and Ivory in the early 1930s. It says WA for Waldorf Astoria. And the story I like to tell about, not this ashtray in particular, but in around 2012, the New Yorker magazine, in the front section where they have little ongoing things just happening in Manhattan, they were telling the story about how the Waldorf Astoria was offering an amnesty program. And the amnesty program was for people to return all of the things that were stolen from the Waldorf Astoria, which they list. So no questions asked, you just return the ashtrays and the towels and the door knockers and the keys and all this. And what interested me the most was that in the list of things that were stolen was Herbert Hoover's portrait. And my first museum job in 1972 was at Hoover Presidential Library and Museum in West Branch, Iowa. And Hoover, after he was done being president, he lived at the Waldorf Astoria. And so there's wonderful photographs of him sitting there with his Chinese blue and whites and all that. But his portrait was actually stolen out of the Waldorf Astoria, along with koi fish and other things. So it's just a really great article about all the things and an amnesty program, which seemed fabulous. And then if you follow our Zooms, we had Kathy Fuller-Seeley do a Zoom for us. She's like the queen of dish night at the movies. She knows everything about it. And she did a Zoom a couple of years ago for us, where she talked about this phenomena from the Depression era, where the nobody was going to the movies because they didn't have any money. Women didn't have any dishes because they didn't have any money. The dish makers didn't have any sales because nobody could afford to buy dishes. So they all teamed up together. And so the dishware companies, cheap dishware companies, Salem China and some other ones, shipped their train car loads full of dishes to these major movie theater cities. And then this is an advertising ashtray for the theater in Boston, where they're telling you to come on Thursday night because every time you come to the movie, you get a different dish. And we know from doing this online exhibit of Dish Night at the Movies that one woman at least got 74 dishes. So she went to the movie 74 times in order to get all of the dishes for the set, because each week you went back, you ostensibly got a different dish. Great marketing idea. And then speaking of marketing, everybody put their name on ashtrays, including TEPCO, which is the California pottery that makes dishes. Here's their own advertising ashtray. And then there were all kinds of commemorative and commemorative is the right word I want to use. And here's one that was during the Kennedy presidency. And here's another one that Limoges put out of Eiffel Tower. And that's a fuzzy picture, but there it is. And then Vernon Kilns in California did all those state plates, which we've done some exhibits about, and included in all the state plates are state plate ashtrays. And so here's just an example of them. So all the things I'm showing are just genres of ashtrays, of which we have some and you have more probably. This is one that didn't make it in the show, Shenango China from 1958. It's just a simple thing, but really lovely. I put something in the show that I can't personally stand, which if you love Hummel, sorry about that. But this one's at least a little girl with her laundry baskets that is the ashtray. And Goebel made great things at the same time, but I don't think these were one of them. And then Hyland did all kinds of ashtrays. Frank Coma did this wonderful Zodiac bowl or ashtray. This one didn't make it in the exhibit because I can't find it in storage yet. So Copeland Spode ashtray, which says who burnt the tablecloth. And this one didn't make it in the exhibit, not because I didn't want to, but we don't know where it is at this moment. We've got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of boxes that aren't open. So this is a Whirlpool. It's an enamel. It's a great piece, a gray or blue enamel ashtray. And then one you might not have seen is for the Perfect Hostess, the saucerette set. So the little thing sitting on the saucer edge there, not in a very lovely way, in my opinion, but even in the picture on their box, they don't sit very well. That's where you could put any cigarette in that ashtray as close to any set of china that you want to. And then I'm going to wind up the ceramic part here as I'm winding down here with Glidden pottery. So Glidden had no fear of ashtrays. So this was in Alfred, New York. And so here's a promotional brochure with the stacking, nesting ashtrays. These are all Gulfstream blue that were designed by Glidden Pottery, founder Glidden Parker and Fong Chow. So these are giant. These ashtray boats, you could put hors d'oeuvres in them or things on skewers or something, but they were giant ashtrays and they're huge and heavy. My favorite one of these, the group, is the African sombrero, which doubled as either an hors d'oeuvre server or an ashtray. It's the size of a hat, which I can prove to you because this woman has one on her head in this 1954 ad with cigarettes poking out of it, and she's flicking her ashes inside it. And then a couple more Glidden pottery. This is High Tide that Fong Chow designed. You can see how big that ashtray is because the other one is the martini server, which is very tall. New equations. This is one of the examples of new equations that Fong Chow designed. And here are some views of what new equations look like. One of the most beautiful lines that they did. And then all kinds of teardrop ashtrays. That one was the Boston Spice, and then this one's in an abstract design. So I'm winding down here with the, literally, this is the advertisements that were included in our exhibition. And the quote by Mark Twain, "Giving up smoking is the easiest thing in the world." I know because I've done it thousands of times, okay? So the ads that were in the Ashtray show include things. I learned about Anne Rockefeller's ad from 1936, where Anne Rockefeller's throwing all these lavish dinner parties in New York, and she's Miss Rockefeller, and these are her guests are listed on the card there, and it's really an ad for Camels, of course. And she talks about how she smokes and has some food, and then she has her next course and she lights up, and then so it's to cleanse her palate. It's good for your digestion. And I learned about this ad from Domesticating the Cigarette, which is a website that Cynthia Pormalou had called domesticatingthecigarette.com, and these are in the chat. So if you want this and the next one I'm going to mention that Dr. Bloom loaned us some advertisements for, these are rabbit holes you can go down that you will not regret. So she seems to have disappeared since Dr. Pomerleau, but her website's there. You can go down, visit her online museum. Here's a couple more ads. We have this one from the 1930s for Lucky Strike. You know it's from the 30s because it's a green packaging. Women didn't like green in their clothes or anything else, and so Lucky Strike changed the packaging later on to white. I think Raymond Loewy did the design for the later packaging. But this is how you're going to end. A silhouette is what you're going to look like possibly if you don't keep smoking and taking care of your digestion. And of course, what is a picnic if it doesn't have cigarettes with it? You can see how happy those people are smoking during their picnic. I myself was someone who, drank the Kool-Aid when Virginia Slims came out in the 1960s. I smoked them for a while in my dorm room so I could show how awesome I was. But look at that ad up there where she says, back then, at the top of the ad, back then the working woman could enter the field of her choice. I mean, that's what we went with. Okay, and then Silva Thins. Here's Lucky Strike in the new packaging, so we know this is later on after the 40s, I believe. And then I have to thank Dr. Blum the most for letting us borrow these ads. These are the best ads. And if you go to his website, which is in the chat, and then also it's on your screen right in front of you, I have 4 examples from these ads that are from 1980, from the Atlanta Weekly, and also from the New York Times Magazine from 81. These where they've got food and cigarettes are so close, like it's a pat of butter as your tents, your fine wine, your dessert cart. These are just remarkable. I mean, disturbing and remarkable. Okay, so last but not least, we've got McDonald's disposable ashtrays, the aluminum ones, which leads me into two images of silent butlers in the show. This one, an aluminum one, of course. The other one is a Kay Lemoine design from 1948, which we have in the show in black, but we also own in green and red. And then two things I wished I had, as I'm literally done here, is this is Linda Lighten's work from 1981, and these are, some of them are pretty large as 12 inches, that her cigarettes that she did. And these are included in Linda Lighten's retrospective in the big book about her show. And the last thing that I wish I'd been able to borrow for the show is Richard Shaw, who did this is trompe l'oeil. Okay, everything you're looking at here is ceramic. Book jar with ashtray, and why, I wondered why it had a 1980 and a 2008 date on it, and that's because the bottom book of this set, the first top part, the mail and the ashtray and all that, down to the bottom blue book, were done in 1980, and they're owned by the Fine Art Museums of San Francisco. So, but the last book he did in 2008, when this work was published in that book, and so he added that trompe l'oeil book, it's all ceramic, all porcelain, to the set, and so that's why it has two different dates on it. And I think what's most interesting about this show for myself and Bill and maybe people that visited is that, you know, when you're studying a foreign language and you're just really getting into it, and you finally know that you've kind of not mastered it, but you're really immersed in that foreign language, whether it's Chinese or German or French or whatever, when you start having dreams at night about that in that language. And so I would have to say in the last many months, I dream about ashtrays. I'm not speaking ashtrays or something, but I'm dreaming about ashtrays. And also when I wake up in the morning, my mouth tastes like an ashtray, okay? So that's my presentation about the exhibition Ashtray. And I thank you very much for attending. And I don't know if you've all left yet, but if you're still here and you have a question, you can put your questions in the chat because we forgot to mention that earlier. So I thank you all for attending. If you have to go, go ahead and go. But otherwise, if you have a question or something, feel free to put it in the chat or ask your question. So Bill, are you there?
Yeah, I'm not seeing very many questions, but there are a lot of comments. Fantastic presentation. This should become a book.
Anything else, or can we all go home and have dinner?
That's right. Okay. Thank you, Margaret and Bill.
Thank you, Ken.
Great presentation.
Thank you, guys. It was great. I love your that picture of your house, Margaret.
Oh, thanks.
That's really cute.
So a question, is the Kay Lemoine Branchell ashtray marked?
Yes, that's the one that quite often says styled by Kay Lemoine on the bottom. In the mold, they had that.
And the green thing that you said about Lucky Strike might have just been advertising, but they claimed they gave up the green, as did fashion designers, because of some of the components of green were needed in the war effort.
Yeah, they said they said the green was chromium. Yeah, I wrote about that in the essay, but I mean, I don't know what the truth is about that, but apparently they also tried supposedly to get the fashion industry to encourage women to have green outfits as an option. So they tried the fashion industry before they bothered to make the reasoning that during the war they needed the chrome for apparently the color that was actually used in that green wasn't chrome. I've read that. I don't know what's true about that, but
well, I can't imagine that tobacco would lie to us.
yes, thank you. Anything else before we close the chapter on ashtray this evening?
I want to put a good word in for snufferettes, because they're the only ashtray I know that on the back gives you directions for how to use it. And I love that. And so they didn't all do that, but the rectangular snufferettes, they say on the back exactly how you're supposed to use it, and to count to 10 and your cigarette's out, which I thought was very cool.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah. I'll send you a pic.
I'll go check on the back of the box of the one I have.
Yeah, see if you have it there. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. You're fond of information, as usual.
Oh, yeah, right.
No, really. Seriously.
No, I appreciate it.
Anybody else? Otherwise, I thank you all very much for attending. And I look forward to seeing you next month when Scott Vermillion and Annie Wright present about the right ashtray and the, get the name right, Scott, you're right there.
Ashtray is the right way.
Ashtray is the right way. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Margaret. Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.